Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Global Black Economic Forum. We are here for a panel of Closing the Racial Wealth Gap is a cornerstone of Black joy, presented by Kellogg Foundation. Please welcome our moderator, Rhea Williams-Bishop, Director of New Orleans Programs, Kellogg Foundation. And our panelists, Judy Reese Morse, President and CEO, Urban League of Louisiana. Please welcome Kelisha Garrett, Vice President of Operations and Governmental Relations, Louisiana Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Please welcome Asali DeVan Ecclesiastes, CEO, Ashé Cultural Arts Center.
Good afternoon and welcome, y'all. Happy Sunday. I am Rhea Williams-Bishop, and I serve as the Director of Programming for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Very proud and excited to lead the work here in New Orleans. So throughout this week, we've talked about justice and joy and the intersection of those two, and reminded to lean in intentionally to our greatness. In New Orleans, 60% of the citizens are Black. And Black entrepreneurship has grown through the decades, but only realizing 2% of the receipts. This has been static for years. There's a reason why, and we're here to talk about that today. It is more than buying Black. Today we will talk about closing that racial wealth gap and what it will really take in order for us to do so. So our panelists here are native New Orleanians, and they have done this work and been involved in this work many, many years. They're also a part of the I Am New Orleans campaign that was created at the onset of COVID with one goal in mind, and that is inspiring conversation and, more importantly, action around these issues of racial equity. And we are very honored to bring this conversation to the Essence stage today. Recently, Ashé has hosted a convening of Black economists from all around the country to discuss the issue and building humanitarian economy in New Orleans. The data support buying Black is good, it's very necessary, but it is not enough to close the wealth gap. And the truth is, other factors significantly influence this gap and the ability to scale and sustain Black entrepreneurship. This conversation will build on that and expand the discussion, bringing clarity to and greater connection between Black economy, Black political, and Black voting power. So let's tell the truth and shame the devil. Sometimes we hear the word policy and we completely glaze over, but we need to be focused on how we influence it, making the connection between the vote and policy and how it affects both lines, the bottom lines for both of these. So, Kelisha, if you could tell us, how does policy play a role in Black entrepreneurs' ability to both build, grow, and scale their businesses?
Thank you so much. When we talk about policy and having something to be built, we're looking at what that foundation is included of. If you talk about building a bridge, you have to have the pieces in order to put the concrete together and make something really stable. So when we look at policy as an ability to be able to outline an initiative or a guidance that can be given to either municipalities, governmental agencies, our corporate partners, and having our businesses understand how to follow those guidelines, it puts in place regulatory control. It looks at ways that you can have compliance and reporting. It allows us to have a pathway forward to understand how to start our businesses, where we can impact different opportunities, so that we can scale our businesses, and also understanding how to grow them either through industry, through our delivery, our service methodology, working with each other, also looking at ways that we can grow our workforce by hiring from within our community. That gives them an ability to be able to scale those businesses and provide services to various different individuals rather than having a single source of income or stream of an opportunity coming from one particular industry. I do think that policy leads the way for this, in working as we do with the Louisiana Chamber of Commerce Foundation, directly with minority chambers that provide the pillars that allow businesses to know the pathway forward and be able to scale and grow those businesses through access, awareness, and participating in opportunities.
Great, thank you. So now we'll turn to Judy, my friend. Judy.
Rhea.
Hey, how does policy relate to our individual lives, and how can we now be better informed about that?
Thank you so much for the question. I have to begin by saying thank you to Rhea and everyone at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for giving us this opportunity to talk about this very, very critical conversation, and also to feature I Am New Orleans. For those of you who are from New Orleans, this represents who we are and what we do and what we care about. And for those of you who are visiting from other parts of the country, I hope that you will hear something that is reminiscent of what's happening in your city, and that this will be meaningful to you. So thank you for the question about policy, because I have the honor of serving as the president and CEO of the Urban League of Louisiana, and we focus on policy issues every day. Policy has to be demystified. We have to break down this idea of policy as something complex that only certain people understand, and more importantly, certain people can turn policy into law and practices. That is not the case. Policies are the things that happen to each and every one of us every day. They're laws or they're practices for things to happen or things to stop happening. And that's the way we think about policy at the Urban League of Louisiana. It is critical that we pay attention to policy, that we pay attention to what's happening around us, and that we vote. It is so critical that we connect policy to voting, because we can vote for a policy or vote for a candidate who will then become an elected official who will be making those decisions that represent us in our communities. So we first have to understand that we, each of us, and every one of us, we are policymakers. That is not just limited to those individuals who make policy for a living. We, community, we are policymakers. And once we understand that, then we have to understand how to take that next step, which is to pay attention to how policies are being created. You just heard Kelisha talk about how policies can be created to help small business owners. We know that building generational wealth is critical. So we want to demystify policy. We want to understand that we are all policy makers. And then we want to understand when and how to influence those who are responsible for making policy. I think when we start to do that, Rhea, we can really start to see the changes that we want to see in our communities.
Exactly, Judy. So none of this, we all know none of this happened overnight. This has been 300 to 400 years in the making of systemic oppression, and it's just being played out right here, right now, in local and federal political spaces. We all know this. Consider this. The Black community spends $13 trillion per quarter in the U.S. Let me repeat that. $13 trillion. But this is still not enough to reach parity for Black-owned businesses. So they need flexible capital, they need quality human capital, and also home ownership. These are all must-haves in the equation or the formula to close this racial wealth gap. So with that, I will ask the next question. Asali, why is the input of Black culturalists so crucial to implementing policy change?
Well, when this panel first started, they were playing Wipe Me Down in the background. And as important as this conversation is with my illustrious colleagues who I admire so much, and this audience that I want to impress so much, I had to stop myself from chair dancing, you know? Right? Because that is what culture and art is able to do. The people who make art, the people who make culture are able to get into places and spaces of intellect, of intention, of logic, of spirit, of heart, that can change things that seem intractable. And what really does seem intractable, especially considering the rulings that have come down both from judicial spaces and from legislative spaces, you know, they're pouring a lot of hate into the atmosphere, into our daily lives. And it is going to take the work of culturalists to shift that in society. One, to help us to deal with the impacts of that. But when you put culturalists at the policy table, they help us to vision something that we don't even know is possible, because they can create a world we can't see yet. And we don't want to see these policies that we have now. So any chance, because I know there are artists and culture bearers in this audience who are listening and hearing me, I want you to know your role as policymakers and understand your power to reach places that most policymakers could never even consider.
Thank you, Asali. That's exactly right. So it also reminds me that the Black community has had to become creative at making money and achieving joy in spaces where we've been stifled. So you make a great point, and I'm reminded, this is Sunday, Black joy. The song, This Joy That I Have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world can't take it away. So we have to live that every day. Black folk have managed to thrive in spite of all the barriers because of our ingenuity. This is what we do. We're here celebrating 50 years of hip hop, jazz, blues, all the things we built. We built it, but we don't always enjoy the primary benefit of monetizing it. And until we do that, the wealth gap will never be closed.
That's right.
So question for Kelisha. How can policy work bridge the reality of where we are to the opportunity of where we need to be?
Rhea, I love the fact that we are talking about bridging yet again. And when you actually talk about reality versus what is stated through policy, oftentimes we too have to sit back and say, is that able to be accomplished? There are so many things within policy, whereas we have had integration, but there is still not equity and equality in the opportunity in order for us to participate and to be able to reap any benefits that would bridge and close this wealth gap. As we look at policy changes that socialize the ability for us to be seen at the table, but still has institutionalized through implicit and inherent bias, not having us able to actually do any work or to see any change in movement in the ability to spend dollars with our contractors, to have those organizations be able to provide services for us, have them be able to grow and scale as we talked about earlier. So when we talk about reality of where the opportunity lies everywhere. This is the land of opportunity. And oftentimes we have to break those doors down and we have to make our own opportunity. There is nothing that we as a people cannot do. When Asali was talking about stopping from chair dancing, trust me, I was over here trying to wiggle and keep a straight face. But that's because we are multi-dimensional people. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And absolutely, we have had to break those glass doors down and make sure that we are seated at the table. Because unfortunately, if you have the same people of the same race or same gender seated around a table creating the policy, there will be no innovation.
That's right.
There will be no inclusivity. There will be no equity. There will be no parity. And it's not equitable. And so thinking that just because we have an opportunity to participate, that's it and that checks the box. We're here today to tell you that, no, we need every one of you, each and every one of you, to go back to your community, to participate in the opportunity to cast your vote, to be heard, to sit around a table and make sure that you are bringing back the voice from the community and sharing that information so that we can have policies that we don't have to rely on decisions from one body of government that can try to set us back generations, as we needed that little entrance in order to be able to participate in what is known as the American dream and get a piece of the pie. So I think it is inherent upon all of us to know our voice, to understand that in order to bridge that gap, in order to access those opportunities, we too have to share in providing awareness. We have to talk to each other. We need to know what each other can provide from a business or service. And more importantly, we have to spend our dollars in our community supporting our businesses, educating our children, and allowing them to expand in their vision of wanting to lead and be entrepreneurs and bringing their dreams to reality. So that's my reality of the situation.
Thank you. Thank you. Judy, how can we bring an economic lens to the way we vote, and when can we expect to see results after doing so?
Here's what I would recommend. You have to really be clear. We have to really be clear as a community about what it is that we want to see happen. I believe this so much that at the Urban League of Louisiana, we have created a signature initiative called the See Change Initiative, S-E-E Change Initiative. We work with a number of organizations, those represented on this stage, supported by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And the whole idea is to find the data that will tell us exactly, precisely, how to close the racial wealth gap. We talk to community members across the state of Louisiana, and the #1 issue for community members in the state of Louisiana is closing the racial wealth gap. Our people want to be able to build generational wealth that can be passed on to future generations, just like our white counterparts have had the benefit because systems have been created to allow them to do so historically, generation after generation after generation. And so we partnered with a data organization, the Data Center, here in the greater New Orleans area, and we found the data. Guess what we discovered? There are actually 3 ways to close the racial wealth gap here in the greater New Orleans area: by increasing income and wages, through home ownership, and through business ownership, through supporting entrepreneurship. And so now that we know the pathways, we're beginning to work to see the change in those areas. This is not short-term work. This is long-term, many years work in the making. But we're okay with that because we are resilient and we understand that this is something that has always been ours, but we're now trying to access it. But here's the key, back to policy. The change is going to happen through policy changes, through changes in practices, and through changes in programming. We want to make sure that small businesses have the opportunity to compete, that when a disaster happens, whether it's a global pandemic or it's a hurricane or a tornado here in New Orleans, that our Black-owned businesses have the opportunity to get those disaster-related contracts. That hasn't been the case in the past. We have to make sure that there are actually policies in place to be able to give them that opportunity. When individuals need to increase their wages, this is why it matters who you elect as your city council member, because that person is going to be voting on whether or not there should be an increase in wages. And when it comes to being able to buy a home that we know can be used to leverage to send our children to school and to borrow so that we can make investments in additional pieces of property that can be passed down, we know that the policies have to be fair and equitable so we have the opportunity to compete. So policies are critical, but income and wages, buying a home, starting a business, these are things that we understand. We have to make sure that we are at the table and present, and that's how it's connected.
That's right. You're exactly right. So one last question before I close us out. Asali, why is buying Black not enough to close the wealth gap?
Y'all, I hate to tell you, we don't have enough money. We just don't. I looked this up right before we came out. There are 770 billionaires in this country. 8 of them are Black. of the 22 million millionaires, 8% of them are black. So I know we heard that, was it $13 trillion number?
$13 trillion.
Like, oh, that's buku money to put into the economy, right? They have buku more than us, right? And so, we're never saying don't buy black. It is essential to do that.
Right.
But we did not buy ourselves into income inequality. I think that, when we say that, when we say it, we mean for the love of our community and the support of our entrepreneurs to buy black. But when policymakers say it, they're saying it's your fault, get yourself out of it. No, we need the same energy. And I mean, like my children always telling me, come at it with the same energy, mama. So we need this country to come at racial inequality, particularly income, economic inequality, with the same energy that they put into the hateful practices of taking away, of stripping racial equality. We lose intergenerational wealth at almost 70%. We need the full, what do they call it, the faith and force of the U.S. government, which is what created the institutions and the policies that strip us of wealth, to put all of that back in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as I close out, I just want you all to think about this for a moment. Conversations like this can really lead to generational change and tie into the I Am New Orleans campaign. We want you to join us and continue this conversation at IamNewOrleansVoices.com. We want to thank our wonderful panelists, Judy, Kelisha, Asali. You all were fantastic. This felt like sitting at a kitchen table having a conversation. I hope you all felt that as well. So let me leave you with the last thought. We have to come together. Just as we sing along with Monica or Jill Scott and not miss a word, the unity in the Superdome during the concerts, we need to apply that same energy to this effort, to getting out to vote. We need to apply the same energy that we utilize when we swag surf or electric slide. Put that energy in voting, put that energy in following policy. We have to stay connected through our local communities and working with organizations like Ashé, like the Chamber, like the Urban League, and make sure that we stay in tune and in touch with them and educate ourselves so that we know the issues and we can take action on those issues. Educate yourself through resources like, we have a document with WKKF called The Business Case for Racial Equity. We have a national focus, but we also have a New Orleans place-based specific focus that gives you tools and techniques and information that you can use to share around your kitchen table or share at your city council meeting or at the state or federal level. We must stand up and be heard. We do have a choice. Vote with your voice, and make sure you keep in mind the song, This Joy That I Have. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Rhea.
Thank you, Rhea.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, audience. You've been great.
Thank you.